follow the instructions. And what it'll do is it'll run. It won't look like anything has happened, and there's actually great tutorials on the web about by this guy Klaus on how to set it up. But what will happen is you'll have it'll be kind of installed in the background, and then what you want to do is set up a button. And to do that, basically you kind of right click somewhere up here and look for where it says customize. And there is, you probably want a toolbar. And in here somewhere there'll be something called class tools. And there it is. So once it's installed, it'll pop up here. And what you can do is, well, you can set up your own custom toolbars and stuff, which is what I've got up here. But you basically can either make a new one, new toolbar, or you can drag it. It's a bit hard to see, and you can drag that tool into that toolbar. So now I have that little icon there, and yeah, there's stacks of these things in here. So you can set up stuff that you don't want to have to dig for in here. If you use something, you might set up either a keyboard shortcut, or you might set up a button. So then you can drag that guy up here. All right. So once you have that installed, you click on it, and what should happen is Map Room starts to open up. It suggests working in kilometers, and you don't have to do that. But if you're doing massive areas, like sort of the size of a country, so you can do mapping at, well, you can kind of use it for mapping, multiple countries. You could be doing all of Europe, for example, with this. You would definitely want to use kilometers. But in our case, I've still got mine set to be working in meters. So in my unit setup, system units, meters. Gosh, I might just close that off. I don't need that. I don't think I'll do that now either. Constantly harassed. Okay. And so there's a stack of things in here, and it's definitely worth exploring some of these. You can bring in shape files and KML files. So if I think some of you that have done the previous semester's sort of sister version of this subject, you'll know about shape files and KMLs and stuff. And so you can kind of interact a bit, I don't know if it's seamless, but reasonably well with GIS kind of data. There's satellite data, OpenStreetMap, etc. There's some demos which are highly detailed and worth a look. But I think probably the one that's most useful in this context is the OpenStreetMap and satellite one. And what it does, once you click on that, it creates these sort of helper objects. They're just splines, but there's a bunch of kind of data embedded in those. So just be very careful not to delete them, unless you want to delete all of the intelligence of your kind of map room objects. So that's plonk those little. Yep.
I'm just trying to download it and it's just not working.
Go into settings. Well, multi-threading. I might experiment with that, but not now. You can set a location for where it puts some of the images and stuff. It has a default, which is maybe not so useful. There's also the license, and this is basically we're using the node-locked version. And what we do is we edit the key. So it's that you get that string of numbers. You click on the edit button and you paste that in, and you click on the green button, and then you need to click on activate product key locks to machine. I'm not going to mess with it because it's working and I don't want to stuff it.
No, mine says thank you for your time and survey, filling the survey, something like that.
Yeah, so
I got it. It took like an hour or so to come through though.
Where did you get it? Did you get it through email? Was it on that same screen? I already closed the screen.
It was through email, through my student email. But it took like an hour and 15 or something to come through.
Okay.
No, Robin. Actually, I emailed you personally, so other
Oh, okay.
guys probably can directly get from that survey if you put in your name and your Sweden email, right? So your Sweden email should like followed by @sweden.edu.au. So your student number and @sweden.edu.au.
That's exactly what I did, and I didn't get anything.
Huh.
Yeah, same. I did mine about 2 hours ago and I haven't got anything yet.
It should directly pop up.
Okay. So if you've got it up and running, actually, yeah, we'll just move along. So you should be up to, you'll have these guys if you start the new thing. And when you go into here, you've got map. If you pick on the OpenStreetMap and satellite and click on that, the first one it takes you to is map space. And that is where you pick a location. If you know the longitude and latitude of your specific site and you've already been working on a project and you've got GIS data and you're working in CAD, this is basically the center of this model in longitude and latitude, and it'll be plonked here, which is, if I turn the grid on, is 0, 0 in Cartesian space. And if you don't know the longitude and latitude, if you're some sort of weirdo that doesn't know exactly those things of every site, you can plug in, something like, what was I doing before? Let's do the farm. It's got some tall buildings. So you double click on that and update your space. Again, doesn't look like much has happened. But if you go across to the terrain button here, we can set it to rip an aerial photograph or whatever. Let's just do a quick one with the defaults. So that has pulled in a plane. Why don't we set it to be? Let's set it to be Bing, and depending on the sort of resolution that you plug in, it will take either longer or shorter amount of time. So it's ripped the aerial photograph of Shanghai from, in this case, Bing. There's a stack of different maps in here. The map box, it's got pirate maps, very handy. There's, I think the map box's aerial photographs are pretty good. The pirates aren't working. It's a shame. And this is the resolution of the image, so that's pretty low. What I would tend to do is bump that up to something more like 2000 or something. And if you click on estimate zoom level, that will change this here, which is about how it breaks up the tiles and kind of brings the data in. Let's just keep things simple. We'll just do Bing, at a high resolution, and I'll update that. That should take a bit longer to bring it in because it's pulling more data. And the interface is something that, this is a relatively cheap tool. It would maybe do with a bit of polish. It'd be nice to have some sort of indicator that things are still working. But there we have the aerial photograph. It'll look fairly resi because that's how it's being displayed. But if you render that, it'll be a much higher resolution. Well, it'll be at 2000 by 2000 pixels as a texture. So I'm reasonably happy with that. You can also plug in the terrain. So there's a couple of options, and I can't remember which one works better, but you can play with those. Sorry. So you can play with the terrain. Maybe we won't go through that now.
Just because we don't have the, I think, API key, I think we can't view the satellite image there.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think we'll just. Well, this doesn't matter. I'm just showing you what it can do. But you'll have some stuff in there. So there'll probably be the mapnik. I think it's open source, doesn't need API from memory. So you might have a map that looks a bit like that. And the API key thing, I mean, we'll post instructions, but you go into, set up a Bing account, because to do for the first time, and you navigate and get the code and you paste it in the same sort of way. So and then the size, the kind of overall area is another thing that you want to kind of think about. And this is in kilometers, which is, again, could be a little improvement on the interface, but 10 here is 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers. And you can also offset. So if you wanted to get this part of Shanghai on this side, you can offset. Let's go into the OSM button. And you could pull down 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers, but it'll take a lot longer to do that. It might take a while to generate and stuff, and we want to keep it really, I guess, keep moving. So I might just set it to 1 by 1. In here, you've got OSM data, so you can bring in all the kind of OSM data, so full OSM data, just to keep things going. That will, of course, take a lot longer to pull the data down. And if you've got 2 kids doing homeschooling and your wife's also on a Zoom teaching, that will take a really long time. So I'm not going to do bigger than 1 kilometer, and I'm not going to do the whole data set. But you can pick out which things you want. You can also, if some areas have tree data, so I know where was I doing Lyon or somewhere in Marseille in France has tree data for the whole city, so you can bring that in as well. I won't. And you can, if you've got if this was in Hong Kong, you'd probably look at getting the terrain and trying to have it kind of conform to the topography. It's not perfect, but it's not a bad start. Oh, that was pretty quick. So that's 1 kilometer by kilometer. That's very quick. And then, so if I'll just turn that off. So yeah, that's quick because there's not much there. Basically, there's it's brought in shapes. So there's splines, and this is basically the metadata from OSM. So they're buildings that are 8 levels. That's an office building. So it depends on how good the data is that you're pulling in. But from there's style sheets that you can apply. And so this is probably, I think if you were representing stuff that isn't building, so you could bring in a GIS data set of type 2 diabetes density across Australia or something like that, based on statistical areas, for example. And you might then set up your own little custom sheet that uses the number of occurrences as height. In our case, we'll just stick to the standard kind of OSM style sheet. You can exaggerate the Z, but I don't want to do that. I'll just click on apply. And this is where I was trying to do all of Paris before. Maybe it's finished now. No, it wasn't. Yeah. What was that? 3Ks by 3Ks with all of the streets and stuff. But that should be reasonably quick. So there are the buildings, and it's got heights. So very much doing, if you're familiar with ELK, it does pretty similar process to ELK. Different interface. Takes a little bit to get used to, but once you get it, it's super quick because you can do anywhere in the world that has OSM data. You could do Faulkner, you could do Paris, you can do, and I think a lot of the cities. We did a bit of photogrammetry ripping from Google Earth, but if you're wanting to do stuff in China, that's not an option. So OSM data can be pretty good in China, so you can do that. And it also sticks. You can see how they're built in here. So they're a spline with a shell modifier, basically kind of going upwards. So I can change that parameter if I wanted to. And then it sticks on a kind of randomized material thing, which we haven't got into materials because there's hardly time, but it basically sticks a complex multi-material thing onto all of these, so you get a bit of variety without having to model all these manually or change materials manually. What about now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Thank you. It's one of those days. yeah, so this was a model that I did earlier, and it's got, I guess it's got some detail. These trees could be a bit nicer, but you know, if you're just sort of looking at street arrangements and kind of generic urban form and how it might be sort of fitting together, this model's probably, you know, not a bad level of resolution to kind of start doing massing and urban designy stuff. And it's set up in a way that let me just go to another viewport. In a way that has a bit of flexibility in terms of if I turn my driver splines on, I can edit, say, the shape of this spline here. Just leave that. And depending on how powerful or how much your computer's struggling, you can edit street networks and have this kind of randomly generated urban stuff, you know, updating in, well, whether it's, well, yeah, real time or close to real time, depending on how much strain your computer's under.
So is this through MapRoom or is this something else?
No, so we've moved on from
Okay.
MapRoom, but
Yeah.
but I guess there's some similar principles that are applied in this model. So kind of learning how those models are put together. But this is more for if you're generating your own street networks and stuff. So this is a model that I generated, and what we'll do, we'll try it. We'll try to rebuild this model, and I guess we'll see how far we can get. So I wanted to show you what the kind of end result is hoping to look like. So something with footpaths, some roads, some random-ish kind of stuff that looks a bit like buildings, and some trees. I mean, you could stick people and all that kind of stuff in here too, potentially. But it's procedural, so as you modify the geometry, or modify the kind of base splines and stuff, it should be updating. So you can kind of get in and edit, you know, these sort of what I call the kind of driver splines. And I guess, you know, ideally you're getting kind of close to real-time feedback. This is not doing so well today, but it was working really nicely before. Yeah, so if I wanted to cut a cute little curvy boulevard through, but have the geometry kind of updating, this is possible. And it's using some of the stuff that Klaus uses in the way he kind of sets up his building masses, but also using some of the stuff that's possible in terms of different kinds of copies. And so we've done a bit of that copy as instance, copy as reference, and these trees are done as a tie flow. So hopefully we've kind of covered a lot of this stuff, but it takes a little bit of getting your head around the order of things, and but I mean, there's a lot of potential. This is just sort of scratching the surface. So I'll start with a fresh file. Yes. So this one, I think we'll see how we go. We might be able to take it a bit slower and everybody sort of do it together. Just thinking if we've got any plugins that are required. So we've got TieFlow. Hopefully everybody's got that one already. I'm struggling to remember in the COVID time soup of whether we talked about spline offset. Have we done any spline offsetting yet?
No.
No.
Okay, so if you type in to Google I2 spline offset, hopefully this one will pop up, which is it's actually the people that do a thing called Forest, which is a super powerful plugin. This one, actually, I want to post it in the chat. This is quite a nice little script. It's completely free, unlike Forest, which costs you some dollars. Spline offset, you download it. Do I have to log in? I don't want to do that. Is it just doing that because I'm...
You have to create an account because I've used this thing before.
Oh, God, I don't want to do that now. Maybe I'll just share. Actually, Tierney, do you have the DLL file?
Yeah, I will share in the episode.
Yeah, that's easier. Yeah, so it's just a plugin. Let's not that way. Oh, there's instructions. Excellent. So hopefully we'll have a little update. We'll have the DLL, and again, it's just that process of installing the plugin or dragging it into your plugins folder. But whilst we're waiting, I'll show you what it does. So you've got still a couple of shapes. Oh, nice random color there, Max. Screen grey. So once it's installed, it just acts as a modifier. So you go to the modifier panel, and it's under spline offset, and there's a bunch of parameters that you can tinker with. There's the number of offsets, kind of handy. You can do all sorts of wacky 3D sort of transformation stuff. If you're building a ziggurat, might be useful. Or in our case, we're probably more interested in kind of doing it as streets, and in which case we might be kind of offsetting, in two different directions. So I'll do another spline offset. If you've got an open spline, it's a little bit weird in that it tries to kind of close it off. That's just a setting that you can kind of go down here and turn off. So under end type, we can set that to open, but not. So we don't want to close the line. We want to leave it as open, but with a but end. So there's other types. You can do like a rounded. What's that? Not updated. Oh, end. Sorry, open end. Round. You can also turn the original line off, which is probably what we're wanting to do. Yeah, there's I believe that is square. And you can also change the distance of the offset. So this is super useful for doing things like roads. So we can kind of set up a road network. Apply that modifier to a bunch of things. Change our end type and turn off the center. And now we've got this kind of nice sort of parametric offset thing. Cute. Beautiful. So you should be able to just grab that spline offset. There it is. And you can download it. And depending on which version of Max you're running, grab the appropriate one and go through the process. Maybe we'll have just a moment for you to all get that up and running. Are you all still there? I can't tell.
Downloading it still.
Okay. So whilst we're waiting, because these have been uploaded to YouTube, I might mention NordVPN, which is a special VPN service that you should all be installing. This YouTube video is sponsored by NordVPN. Click under the link with the description for a 10% discount on your NordVPN. Man, it's such a tough crowd. It's also brought to you by Skillshare.
Where does the DLM file go again? Sorry.
Okay, so it's you want to put it in your well, it depends on, yeah, it's probably under your C drive, under program files, Autodesk, and the version of Max that you're working with, and there'll be a folder called plugins. So you just drag it into there. Yeah, I just realized that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so really the ones that we want to work with are mostly the distance and the end type, and to turn off the keep original spline. And just out of curiosity, if I do extrude this, does it? Yeah, that is very nice. There's something you can bring into Studio if you
Wow.
run out of time.
First comment is it's not disabled compliant.
No, we'd have to smooth that out. Some sort of fancy. No, this is a piece of art, sculpture. Okay, I'm getting distracted. Focus, Max. Okay, so once we've got our plugin working, we've had a little bit of a drive. What we'll do is let's try and work in something vaguely resembling real world kind of scale. So I might just draw a rectangle. Let's think maybe 500 by 500 meters. And I'll just, yeah, so that'll be that can be the kind of area that we work on. So just for a little refresher, so shapes under the create panel, shapes, rectangle, you just draw one and set the size in here. And then what we can do is we can draw some lines. I'll do those in the top viewport. If I do kind of hard clicks, they'll be straight. If I click and kind of click and drag, you can get curves, which we're pretty sure we talked about. Let's keep them reasonably straight, just to so that our computers don't die whilst we're doing the demo. I might actually, yeah, something like that. So these are just some splines. So these will be like the center lines of our roads. And what we want to be able to do is kind of keep these as sort of driver splines. So we kind of drive the geometry with these. So, you know, we can get into the sub-object and edit the shapes of the splines and have all of that other geometry updating. That's the hope or the aim. Just change the color of that guy so you can see it. And this will, I mean, to get that model to be set up and working in the same way, you know, requires multiple reference copies with different procedures. If you don't follow along, try and follow along, but if it doesn't stick, don't feel bad. This probably might take a few goes to get right. And then it's also something that, you know, there's a lot of scope to play with the order of things because they'll produce different results. So has everybody got something vaguely resembling what I've got? Beautiful. Okay. So what I could do is I could take these streets and I could apply an offset, get the settings all right. But what I want to do is I want to be able to keep those original splines so I can kind of manipulate things more easily. So what I'll do is I'll do a clone. So edit, clone, and I'll do these as a reference copy. And okay, and I will actually try and maybe keep things through. Try and use layers to keep things kind of working a bit more simply in terms of turning stuff on and off. So what I'll do is I will make a layer. This, let's call this road casement or something. That way I can turn them on and off, and I can also turn these guys. Actually, let's select all of those guys, and we'll make another new layer. We'll call this the driver. So now I've got my driver splines. So these are kind of master shapes that drive the roads, and then these will be the road casements. And I can select all of them, select them in here, and now I'll apply the spline. We need a button for spline offset.
I don't have the option to make a group from the layers. How did you get that little plus sign there?
Okay. I'll just do the spline offset and then I'll come back to that. So spline offset. And now I would set those settings, so closed, no, open but, and don't keep original geometry. So if you've got so you bring up the layer dialog through this guy. Sometimes it's set to be on this guy, which is hierarchy, which sort of lists everything, and you just need to click on this guy next to it. So
Okay.
and then anything you've got, well, you can sort of make selections and sub-selections. So if I grab this guy and made a new layer, it'll plonk that onto the new layer, and you double, or just click a second time and it'll let you change the layer. So I'm going to call this geometry buildings. Okay. Any other questions on any of that? Nope, nope. Okay. So then what we want to do is kind of combine all of these guys. And there's multiple ways of doing this. You could take those center lines and combine them into one sort of multi-spline central spline thing that gets offset. And but I find the offset spline does have a kind of it's somewhere in here, heel intersecting splines. And that's worth a play, but I found that the built-in spline Boolean system is a little bit more robust. And so what I will do is, let me think. Let's do, yeah, we'll keep this. We'll take our rectangle and we'll go across to the create panel, and under shapes, we'll go to more shapes and we'll go to compound shapes. And then there's Boolean, and I should really do, no, we should do two lots of these, but let's do just one for now. And we'll set this to be subtract. So I want to cut these streets out. And I'll add operands and start subtracting. And then right click to get out of that guy. So now we have, if all's gone well, you have a shape that you could extrude, something like so. But we won't extrude it just yet. We'll do some other things. Do you want me to go through that again? So that's a yes? Or
Yes.
okay. So I select my rectangle. We've got all of these others that are offsets of those original kind of driver splines, which we've still got there. They're just turned off. We select our rectangle, we go across to create, because this is we're not just modifying the rectangle, we're kind of combining it and creating something new with different shapes. Under splines, we click on the more and go to compound shapes, and then we pick on shape boolean. This then brings up this guy. We want to subtract, basically cut these streets out of this rectangle. So I'll go to subtract, and then I can start adding the operands. So if I click on that, they start getting sort of cut out.
I got that part, but like when doing the roads, they turned out very terrible on my side. Like some places they look very weird. They don't follow the line in some parts.
In terms of the shapes that you're trying to subtract?
Now when I'm doing the spline offset,
right,
they don't look normal.
So I'll turn that guy back on. So the parameters you're wanting to set, just one parallel. We don't want it offsetting multiple times. You want it to be a distance of 10 is probably pretty reasonable for a street, given that it's going both ways. So a 20-meter street, fairly typical. All of these should be left as default, except for you want to have that open butt. If you have it as closed, you'll get this sort of weird stuff. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got.
I got
Yeah.
that.
So you want to open the butt.
Marcus, because I didn't cut the rectangle. The rectangle it cut it the other way. The roll cuts the rectangle.
Click inside.
Okay.
Did you click inside? You got to click outside of the rectangle.
Okay.
I try. Thank you.
So ideally, when you turn your driver splines back on, if you've separated those onto a different layer, you should be able to go into the sub-object of those and change them. And your Boolean should be, still doing its thing. If everything's worked properly.
When you copied them, did you do them as an instance?
As a reference.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, because if you do them as an instance, everything's identical. Whereas this, you get, if I turn this guy on, you get this grey line. So it's just a line, so that below that line is instancing, and what happens above is specific to that that referenced clone.
Can we also stretch those streets?
Stretch the streets?
Yeah.
What do you mean by
Suppose
stretch them?
The middle one, the red one. Yeah, if you wanted to stretch to the square.
Like if you wanted to make it
longer, not in that sense, the whole line.
Oh, this guy?
Yes.
Yeah. So that, you would just go into that driver spline, go into the sub object,
yeah,
and drag that guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be much nicer. Otherwise, you're building cul-de-sacs, and as we've all been taught in our planning theory subjects, cul-de-sacs are bad. Unless you really like playing cricket. Apparently, they're quite good for that. Not good for network connectivity, though. How are we going? That good, huh?
That's good enough.
Have we all got to this point, or should I wait, or do you want me to go through stuff again? All of the above?
Maybe just continue.
Okay. Right, that's the sign I needed. Okay, so now we've got we've got this guy. I might give that a proper name now because it's like going to be, stuff. Let's call it the outlines. So you could use that to do a bunch of things like, well, we could, you could extrude it. And if this was some sort of, if you're just doing planning envelopes, maybe you could do that. So this is the height limit. It's 40 levels in this zone. You might, do a different chunk in a different height or whatever. If you wanted to, what else can you do? If you wanted to do the greebly thing, if you applied a greeble to this guy, it won't be particularly effective. It's not going to give you quite what you're after. Well, it's not too bad. Because it kind of doesn't, there's something about the way it starts off that it needs something to kind of start to greebulate. That's a word. So the modifier I would stick on this guy first, just to give it some polygons to work with. I would stick a quantify on. So quantify mesh. And if I turn my edges on, this will have a go at kind of slicing this piece of geometry up. So quite useful. So if you've ever got a big piece of geometry that's come in and you want to be able to modify it, so it could have come in from Grinder or something, it's got big polygons, but you're wanting to distort it or FFT or something, you can do sort of add more topology to the geometry through a quantify. The other one is called subdivide. Subdivide, which is a triangular based one. They work slightly differently. This is sort of the maximum size triangle. So if I did 15, the maximum size before it slices in half again is 15, 20. So if you're into triangular shaped buildings, you could read all that, and that might be what you're after. Yeah. Doesn't look quite as generic urban form, so probably better off to ditch that and use quantify. So then
How did
we've
you
got this.
execute that quantify?
Okay, so I'll get rid of that. So I've got just the Boolean shapes, and then if I grab that and do quantify mesh, here you plug in. So this is it's a bit different. So this is the percentage of the overall object. Be very careful not to plug in 0 here because it's not smart enough to know that that's a bad thing to try and divide by 0. So if you went 20,
is quantifier plugin?
Quantifier is a thing that should be built in. So it's just a modifier that's built into Max. So you should be able to slice up the blocks a bit like this. What I had, 5 looks pretty good. It's not going to be perfect, so if you could take this mesh and then slice the mesh and faff about with it. But for a quick just visualization of some generic urban form, I think it's pretty good. So quantify, and then you put your greeble on. And I assume we've all got greeble because we've been doing greebles previously. Yeah. And so then you can plonk your greeble on, and I would do my standard settings. So I turn the taper off. I set a kind of minimum of, I don't know, maybe 6 or something. And then depending on how high you're wanting, 40 meters is 40 meters is very
When I quantify, my rectangle disappears.
The rectangle disappears.
Mm.
Do that. Like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll work for me.
Yeah, the only thing I
don't know what I selected, but like even the move tool, it's in the middle of the whole square. It's not on the whole thing. That makes sense.
If you go across to the display panel, which is over here, is geometry turned off by any chance?
Yes.
Turn that back on. You must have accidentally hit a weird shortcut to my geometry. Yeah, I don't know what the shortcut would be, but that's yeah. Okay. So then, so you've got yeah. So this is a nice greebled up bit of town. It's based on our driver spline. So again, we should be able to go into our splines. Now, if I move this spline, it's not going to do anything because it's not it's well, because if I can move an instance copy independent of another instance copy, and you know they don't, the relationship doesn't go. They're not in terms of spatial location. They're not linked, but they are linked in terms of their actual geometry and their sub-object. So if I change this guy in the sub-object, so I'm editing this line here. If things are working properly, that should be updating. So I can get in there and refine the spline if I want to. Is that working for everybody?
No, mine aren't linked. I think I must have done something wrong at the start.
Yeah, that's okay. I think it's one of those things that you probably need to do it a few times to get it right. But the order of things and the order is quite important in getting the right setting. So if you did your clones not as a reference, then that won't work. So when you're copying, so if I just turn that stuff off. So when you're doing your initial clone under clone, really important to do it as a referenced clone, because that allows you to have a duplicate of that geometry, but it's also you can modify it. So we can do our spline offsets and stuff.
How did you do the zigzag?
So that's just by editing the sub-object. So in splines, you go into vertice. So you can delete vertices, you can add vertices. So there's refine.
Okay. Yep.
So you just click in here, and then you can move these. You can also change. If you right-click over the top, you can turn them into Bezier curves. Bezier curves, and then you've got your Bezier curve whiskers for getting your perfectly nice curvy curves. Have I talked about Pierre Bezier in this class yet? We might extend today's class. We'll go an extra couple of hours. I want to talk about Pierre.
I'm still having the same issue. It's I think it's when I select the actual rectangle, I'm selecting some edit or modify list by accident, and it's not having the effect on the whole thing. So I don't know what part to actually select and put the quantify on.
So you want to get your block outline. So let's do that up here. So we've got our shape. So have you got this shape?
Yeah.
And it's got its roads cut out?
Yeah, I've got it all that, yeah.
Okay. So just make sure that your geometry button here is not ticked.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's all there.
Yeah, because as soon as you turn it into a 3D thing, so if I do an extrude modifier or anything that turns that into from lines to polygons, it'll disappear. But if that's off, it should do that.
So do you have to extrude it before you quantify it?
No, I was sorry. That was just trying to say if you make splines into something that's a polygon mesh.
Yeah.
So for example, extruding. If you've got that guy set to ticked, it just won't show. So yeah, you don't need to extrude it. But so when you apply a quantify, it turns it into a mesh. So again, if that setting is turned off, it disappears. Is that working now?
Hold on.
You just call me Hodor. COVID, I can't get out to do exercise. Bulking up a bit.
didn't say it, but the resemblance is there.
Yeah. It's going to be a really long semester, isn't it?
I'm stupid. I didn't have the view set the edge faces. I think that's what it was.
Yes, okay. All right, so then, yeah, so then we can Greeble that. And since we're doing it all again, another thing that I sometimes do if I'm feeling, particularly adventurous with Greebles, is I'll do a Greeble on a Greeble, in which case I might set the quantify a bit higher, so maybe 8% or 6%. And when I Greeble, the first Greeble, I'll turn my taper off, I'll turn my widgets off, and if I wanted there to be a kind of like a ground floor level of retail across the whole kind of area, might go like 4 to 10. So this is sort of 4 doesn't feel quite right, 6 to 10. So a nice kind of ground level, slight variation, but it's kind of stuff that you would find on a busy bit of city. And then if you select the tops, and remember that we've done some other stuff where we've modified geometry with sub-object selection in, what was it, edit poly or mesh select. This same stuff applies in our Greebles. We can, whilst it's got those selected, we've turned our widgets off, we can then do a Greeble on top of the Greeble. And you'll notice that it's sort of, we've got Greebles happening just on top. So that, then I can go, all right, so I've got my sort of 4 10 meters, and then I could add another, whatever, 30 meters as my maximum. I might do another 4 as a minimum. So I've got some nice undulating urban stuff happening.
I'm assuming in Greeble there isn't any way to control the randomness of, do you know what I mean?
The randomness.
So let's say if you want like 20% of the buildings to be above like 10 meters or something, rather than it being just completely random.
No, there isn't. No. But I mean, I guess this is all stuff that you could also potentially do. It'd probably be a bit different, but you could do similar stuff with something like TieFlow, where you could get a lot more control, but more complex to set up. So believe it or not, this is supposed to be a nice, easy, simple introduction to this urban model. Turns out modeling cities maybe is actually kind of hard. But yeah, so that I think that would require a bit of either that. You could either do it with TieFlow, or there's you could probably do an MCG routine. Which let's not go into that now. But a good question. I think the other thing that you can do, which we've touched on a little bit, is you can conform tops to a surface. But I won't do that today because I think everybody's probably getting close to reaching their limits. No way, I'm getting tucking out now. So then we could have a Greeble on top of a Greeble. You've got a fair bit of control. There's other stuff. If you wanted this to be a bit more sparsely set out, you could do that first Greeble could be have no height and have a lot of. Whoops. I could go back to that original Greeble, and instead of it having retail, you could get rid of that, and set a big taper. And now there's sort of permeable streets working its way through. So there's a bunch of things that you can mess with all of that. I think we won't go into materials, but it's worth just knowing that this is possible. You can set different material IDs on the different elements. So I can set one material for the ground floor, so you might have some retail-y looking texture as a material ID 1, and then on the next Greeble up, you might set it as 2. And then if you do a complex multi-sub-object material, you could stick like a, building facade texture. But let's not go into that now. Okay. how's everybody going? Have we got something that looks vaguely like this? Okay, that's good. Very good.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
This part here, something I didn't understand why you did is, why do you duplicate this layer, the lines? Because you still can modify these ones here.
Yes, that's right. You can. I was going to do something else with those. Let me think of what I was going to do. Yes. No. So what you've got there. So these are. It was about. So you've got these guys, and yes, you can edit those, but you need to go into the sub object, down into the. It's a few steps. So that's perfectly fine. But the other thing I was going to do is and yes, that's good. That reminds me of the next thing I was going to show you. The other thing we can do, I might just draw another rectangle. So what we've got here is these are quite sharp, these edges. If I wanted to have a bit of a sort of curve, well, I want to do some footpaths. This is the thing I want to do next. I could, if I thought about it, I could kind of copy that as a reference and then apply that stuff, and then take that same shape and kind of loft or sweep a footpath around it. But that would give me a sharp corner, and I want to have a bit of a radius here. So what I'll do is I will just turn this off. So back to my nice rectangular shape. I'll draw another rectangle. Yeah. Draw a rectangle. If I can find rectangle. Starting to get late now. All right. I'll turn my snaps on. I use 2021. Let's just check my snaps. Right click. Endpoint middle. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay. So I'll draw another. Oops. Yes. Okay. Another rectangle. Okay. And this rectangle, I'm going to make this one do my. I'm going to turn this into my curves, I think. Actually, let's go with the. And I think I'll just stick that into the. Yeah, we'll work out where that belongs. Buildings. We'll probably set up a kind of landscape layer or something.
Marcus, how'd you get the snaps again? Sorry.
So snaps are these guys up here. And to tell it which snaps to use, by default, it will be set to grid. Grids, they can be useful, but because I'm an artiste, I can't be constrained by grids. I like to turn them off. But yeah, if you can set them to be sensible units, and they can be quite good. But I tend to use endpoint, midpoint, kind of the sort of stuff you would set in AutoCAD. Little trick for new players: the clear all button. If you're not focusing your eyes, it's not the OK button. It clears all of your settings, but I must have done that about 50 times. So that's all set. Now you just close it. Okay. So then I can do that same process again. And this is where I think probably if I did this another 5 times, I'd get the right, the exact right order of duplication and stuff. And I probably wouldn't have to do this step. But what I'll do is I've got another rectangle, and I'm going to Boolean subtract these road casements again to create a kind of different shape. And so I'll do that by going to Compound Objects, Pro Boolean, Subtraction, and Operands. And I can think of exactly how I should have done this now, but this is fine. So now I've got another version of that guy. If I go across to modify, one of the things that we haven't talked about, which is possible, is there's a seams parameter, which is not so intuitive, but underneath where it says simple, you can fill it, and you can set a fillet radius. Oh yes, and it can be. This is where it could be super useful if you had different hierarchy streets. So I think I was just trying to make things quick and simple by offsetting all of the streets the same amount. But you could have major roads and minor roads and feeder roads and all that sort of stuff with different offsets. But what I can do in here is you can select these different, and you could probably name your streets and all sorts of stuff. But if I select these different lines, I can set the kind of radius in here. So that's a nice curvy one. You can do a chamfer. So, if you want to do a bit of Barcelona, you get a bit of the Serta kind of chamfer thing going. Let's stick to fillet. Yeah. So now I've got a nice kind of footpathy like shape. And there would be a couple of ways you could do this. You could do another spline offset on it, and you could keep your original spline, and then you could extrude it to a footpath height. So 150 or something. That would be one way to build the footpath. You could do a loft, which is probably more complicated than it needs to be for this particular scenario, or let's try something I don't think we've done in this class is I think called sweep. Sweep, super useful, pretty simple. It basically extrudes a shape around your path, and it can be probably you've got a range of things you can use, pipes, and you've got universal beam kind of UV, PFC. There's a PFC somewhere in there. Kind of channels. All of those super useful. You can also do custom, which is really handy when you just pick a shape that you've created. But for a footpath, I think we'll probably just go with bar, and let's change the parameters of that to be more kind of footpathy height. So, and then the other thing, you'll notice that it's kind of going the wrong way. You've got more parameters in here, and this is something, have a play with. It's super powerful. We want it to go out that way. And if you're getting really pedantic, you could probably stick a corner radius on that. Does that do something good? There we go. Maybe it's not quite what we're after. But you could do a custom footpath with the full kind of wrapping curve, and let's not get too carried away. So that's the sweep command or modifier, and that's pretty useful. And actually, probably, and this is where we could have made a few different duplicates. Actually, what I'll do is I'll get rid of my sweep. I might just cut that for a moment, and I might. So I want to use this guy for a couple of different things. I'll duplicate it. So I'll make a clone as a reference, and this will. What I'll do with this one is I'll make that for the curves, and I'll paste that back. So these are my footpaths. I'll hide that guy, and I'll rename this one. And I'll make another duplicate of that guy, clone as a reference, and this one I think I'll call the tree driver spline, and this one I'll offset. So spline offset, because what I want to do is run basically a perimeter of trees along the edge of the footpath. That's not quite the setting I want, so I will not keep original to start with, and we will change the distance. So I'll turn that footpath back on, and I'll change that distance amount so it's sort of trees planted along the edge of the footpath. Did you want me to go through any of that again? Was that a yes or a maybe?
just the curveness, I think. Just how do you get the curvy thingy? Just like how do you make the edges curve? Curvy thingy.
This thing?
Yeah, that thing. The thing.
The footpath thing. So what I did was I took that, well, it was that same Boolean shape thing. So that one, so it's the shape Boolean. I made a reference copy, so this way I can use it to drive a couple of things. So I want to drive the trees, but on a slight offset, but I also want to drive this swept footpath curvy thing. So I set the curviness, which was done through selecting these guys and changing the seam parameters to fillet and changing that. And then this is on the reference copy. I then added a sweep modifier. And yes, that's right. And then we went through some of those. Oh, eggs, nice, look at that. Make a good balustrade. We went to bar and we changed the dimensions of the bar to something that was a little bit like a footpath kind of height. Like 0.15. Yep. No? Maybe?
No, Mum, I'm not gonna lie, I still don't know how you got the curveness for the lines. Like,
to get the
lines actually curved. Yeah, that.
Yes, yeah, okay. So that is in the shape Boolean. So maybe I'll just move this. Just move this over here so we can see what's going on a bit better. So this is about the fillet. So it's in the shape Boolean. If you select these guys where they're the lines, and then pan down to the bottom, there's the seam parameters. And under here you get a bunch of, like there's simple, which is basically a corner, fillet, and chamfer.
Worked. Thank you.
There you go. And then you throw the sweep onto it, and yeah, and you sort of set that. And it'll depend on your model, but it's usually, yeah, in this case it's this guy. So that's about the center of the object being kind of extruded around the path. All right. Don't be rude about my daughter's flute playing. She's only been playing for a couple of weeks. So I get there's the Zoom chat. I record this stuff. It'll come off your marks. Actually, my daughter will be helping me marking, so just be very careful. Okay. We'll keep moving. So, and then this guy here, that was our greebles, that's right. And again, you could do the same sort of deal with here, like instead of maybe we do want it to be a bit more Barthelomery. So we select those and we could fill it. Or it's gonna no, we want chamfer. It's not Barthelomery. There we go, that's more Barthelomery. Maybe not quite that much. Yeah, I might have to do a bit of patchwork in there. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Of course, all of this can be done accurately as well as sloppily, like I've just done it. That is too much for even for me. Okay, so then we had that copy of this line, and we're going to run trees along that. So we need to just adjust that. I mean, this is where, if you're an urban designer particularly, or you're an architect working on a large scale project, this is where you can start to use these parameters to test ideas. So it might be, it's an ongoing argument of where trees should go in the street. Should they be planted in the road reserve, with cars parked between them? Should they be on the footpath? This lets you kind of test those things quickly. Let's do it in the kind of normal edge of the footpathy way. If we've got a spline, so we've got this offset spline, basically we want to array trees along that spline. Stacks of different ways you can do it. Let's not build trees. You can download trees. Let's do so let's just do something abstract for now. I'll just do a teapot because they're kind of a little bit like a tree. Tree, teapot. So let's just imagine that that's a tree. I could edit. Grab some of those guys. No, let's not do this. Let's just leave it as a teapot. And if I wanted to kind of array that around, there are array tools that are built into Max. You could do it with those and it'd be okay if you don't change anything. There are plugins or Max creation graph tools like what's it called? Array along spline or something, clone along spline. You could use that. I think Var, our good friend Var has one of those. Where is it? Clone on curve. So that one's pretty nice, pretty simple. You select your thing, you pick your curve, and pick your curve, and there they are. You can change the frequency. Not too bad. But it does require you to download another plugin, which we won't do. It's got a few parameters that are kind of nice, but what we want to be able to do is get a bit more control over the way these trees are being displayed. So you'll notice that these are all sort of following the spline in terms of direction. One of the things that you can get, it's one of the things that Forest Pro does really well, is it rotates the trees. There's a little bit of wiggle sort of in terms of scale, and they, even though you can use the same mesh for your trees, they look like different trees because when you're looking at them, they're on different angles and stuff. So another way you can do it is by using TieFlow. And if you've got completely lost at this point, don't worry. Why don't we do a very, very simple version over here, where we just start off with a spline, something like so. Got our teapot, and we want to array teapot along the spline. So to do that, we can use TieFlow. That's right. Could actually do a TieFlow for it to open up. So I'll just drag that into the viewport. I'll open my editor, and I'll see if I can get these things. And so this one should be relatively simple as a TieFlow. We just want a birth spline, which is this guy, birth spline. So we want to birth our teapots along the spline. So I'll pick the spline, pick. It's a bit hard to see maybe, but it's now got particles. Let's try and change the color to something hopefully easier to see. So that's now got these particles, and let's get some, we could change the display dots to be ticks or something. So that's a bit easier to see. What we want is geometry, but we need to tell it what the geometry is that we want to sit on each of these particles. So we want shape. And now we need to tell it which object. So if we pan down, we want a reference node. Click on none and click on this guy. So now I've got teapots on my spline. They're not quite as nicely distributed as that var plugin, but what we can do is go back to our birth and tinker with some of the parameters. So at the moment it's set to percentage along the line, and that might be useful. Most of the time in architecture, urban design, we're looking more at distance between things. So, what are the centers? And the other thing that we want to change is the interpolation. We want it to be normalized interpolation. So that way, the length, distance between this guy and this guy and this guy is now, a consistent amount. So maybe have a little go at that. So the steps, you've got a birth spline. You pick the spline, you have a shape, and we set the reference node to be our teapot, and we set our display to geometry.
Marcus?
Yep.
I'm currently doing the V8 clone, the V8 clone modifier to the trees. But what I have is that since the spline for the path are parametrical, so the trees are currently arrayed along two curves instead of one curve that's offset. Do you get what I mean?
No.
Sorry. Basically, when I try to use the curve that has like a spline offset, what the V8 clone pick up is that it picks up two curves instead of one curve that's offset.
Okay, so that was with our this guy here. I might change the color so we can see. So this, I was probably getting a little bit tricksy. This was another kind of duplicate of that shape boolean, and then the offset was set to not keep original.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed that time.
Yeah. So this is not a simple thing to set up, but I guess once you know that it's possible, and you go through it a few times, you get the hang of it. And it is super powerful for testing ideas quickly.
Yep.
So if like our clone it's kind of good for just throwing simple things in a way that where you don't want too much variation. So if this was an actual tree, in fact, like don't do this along with me, but I'll just do it to illustrate the point. So if you've got what's a tree? Where is it? I used to stick them. These are not great trees, but say I've got that tree. It's a little too big, maybe just a little. So I've got a tree, some tree geometry. It's a little bit big. Get some pruning as well. There we go. If I want to use that as my object, so let's see if this wigs out. Shape. Instead of the teapot, I use the tree. That looks a bit SketchUp to me. It's the exact same tree. Looks like you photoshopped it in. So what you can do is add some more complexity to the way it's displaying these things. So you can add let's add a rotation. That's actually, this is what it looked like after the storms the other night. But we would probably just do random rotation horizontal. And so now those trees, when you look at them, they don't look like the same tree. They look like they could actually be, totally different bits of tree geometry. So that's just by adding a random rotation. You could, of course, add what else is there? Add scale. So you can, variation of scale. Could be non-uniform, so you could have a lot of variation in height. So they're looking a bit more like street trees. They're not, even though it's one tree model, it looks like it could be, they could be real trees that are growing in different ways. And then the other thing that you can do, so remembering that tree geometry very beefy. Like in terms of polygons, that's you're starting to get lots of polygons, which I guess that'll start to make your computer chug quite a bit. So you can use proxy objects. I don't think I'll go into that now because it's starting to get quite late. But if you're interested in doing highly detailed trees and stuff like that, have a bit of a search of V-Ray proxies, because that's another one of the shape types somewhere in here. And the other cool thing you can do with the shape stuff is that currently that's 100%. You can add another one, which, let's see, triangular, and if I set that one to be that guy, so now I can get. So if you did have two tree models, you could do, get lots of variations. So it looks like they're totally organic. This doesn't look particularly organic because it's a teapot, but you can get it pretty close, and you can control the percentage. So weirdly, defaults to 100%, but if you had 20% trees, or maybe it's 60% those, and so like this is where if you're interested in species distribution and biodiversity and all that sort of stuff, you can plant species in a balanced way. And then, of course, because I've got this working reasonably well, then I would maybe apply that to my, let's add, find there it is. I get rid of the teapots. Remove. Yeah.
For those spline lines, oh my god. Did you use when you were cloning it? Did you use instant or just copy?
Reference copy.
Because when I do reference copy, if I delete something from this one, it would delete it from the original source too.
Yeah. So this is where I built this thing a couple of times today to try and remember how it worked. If you ever go through this process again and you do it a couple of times, this took a while because we were all doing it together, but you learn something every time you do it. I've got some ideas of how I would optimize this model even more as I was doing it again this time. So you just get a better handle on the relationships. But yeah, so that shape boolean is that's a reference copy. So if I change this one, it's linked to the same starter job shape as the footpath. So if I change that radius, both of those things are changing. And if I change these splines, again, it has to be through the sub-object, but let's see if we can crash the machine. Yeah, that's pretty good. Will it handle being shaded as well? Yeah, that's not too bad. So you've got, everything is, everything's procedural, everything's, what is the subject called? Dynamic modeling. That's what we're doing. That's right. And yeah, so you can start to throw in some lights and materials and stuff. Yeah. All right. Any questions on any of that? I think there's a fair bit that we've gone through. I need a bit of time to digest. You happy with how that turned out? I'm not sure about the rendering of those trees as it grows. Oh, and then the other thing, of course, is if you're about to render those trees, you will need to add a mesh, whatever it is, a mesh operator. That's now a a tri-mesh, and so that should be renderable, I think. Let's give it a go. It's very bloody armor. I need to change my defaults. That's right, I haven't set up suns and stuff.
Yeah, now I understand why you deleted the stuff from the modifier and then you cloned it. Because if it stays in the modifier and then you clone it, everything goes back to the other, like to the new layer, and then you have to, yeah, it's confusing, but okay, it makes sense now.
Yeah. So it's like a ridiculously difficult thing to teach because you kind of need to have done it before you can do it. But now when you go and have a go at this again, you'll know what you're trying to achieve and the steps, and you can, it'll make more and more sense. Yeah. So let's have a look, see if that works. Okay. Maybe not. That's not too bad. There we go. Nice autumn feel about it. And so I guess this is just sort of scratching the surface with the TypeFlow stuff. So powerful for architecture, urban design. You could be scattering particles which are people. You could have people models that are being scattered. Loads of facade stuff that you could be doing with TypeFlow, I reckon. You could be scattering, or you could be putting cars on the street, or maybe you're closing streets and opening up to pedestrians. You could be doing that. Or the other, yeah, I mean, that won't start a new thing, but I guess the other thing you can do is, if you've got all that control, like you can test different height limits and stuff. So like, what if I want more light into the street? What is that like if I change the height limit? And getting that kind of, well, I think this is where, I find Max kind of ideal because you get that, you can start to look at materials and light quality and all those kind of textural things that you might do in something like, what's that, Unity, or what's that cheesy one that people are really into at the moment?
Unreal Engine.
No, it's like a
Houdini.
Unreal. It's just for visualizing, the plaster on trees and stuff. I can't remember what it's called.
Twinmotion.
What was that?
Twinmotion. Powered by Unreal Engine.
No, Lumion. That's the one.
Ah.
There's a couple of them, and it's like they're great. Like they are super quick to get an okay image out, but it's you lose that the parametric kind of flexibility of the model, so that dynamic ability to be testing, the design ideas, changing your ideas, modifying, and getting the visual feedback, as well as you could be getting solar amenity feedback, for example. Like if I was interested in the position of the sun, I could do it properly. I could use a I don't know if I can remember how to do it. You could do a daylight system with exact kind of parameters for, where are we? Somewhere. Melbourne, Australia, Melbourne. Doesn't list Cobram for some reason, and I could be setting what time of the day exactly that I'm interested in testing, time of year. I think I need to change it to V-Ray. Yes, I do. V-Ray. Yes. But then I could be getting, exact shadow positions. Stick a brown plane in there. And I think, actually, I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at that YouTube that we posted earlier, was it yesterday? You can set up multiple sun positions and get the sort of thing that you would do with, I think in last semester we were doing it with Ladybug, This, doing it in Max, you can do it very quickly and get aggregate shadows. You can sort of look at, at different times of day, but get feedback kind of immediately in the viewport. Anyway, I think we might wrap up the kind of demo side of things, unless there's any questions before we do. Any thoughts on any of that before we move on?
I think a lot of us will be rewatching the video. It's a bit overwhelming.